Hello my fellow nerds! As you all know, it is Eurovision time once again. The best time of the year, of course. But there's a huge elephant on the stage this year, and it appeared in the comment section of my last video, unfortunately, despite me being as apolitical as possible. And I see a lot of people asking why Israel gets to compete when Russia and Belarus do not. But before I get into anything, I'm going to put up a disclaimer. I just want you to know that my channel and my content is welcome to all, no matter who you support or believe in. I'm not going to project my political views onto this video, and I'm not going to talk about the conflict or the tragedies. This is a completely neutral analysis, and this video is strictly about Eurovision only. This video is simply a means to understand how the EBU thinks, so we can understand their decision making, why they made this decision, compare it to other cases. I'm not trying to defend the EBU either. I'm just trying to understand their decision making here. So here's why Israel, and insert controversial country here in the future, are not banned from Eurovision this year. So why did the EBU keep Israel? Very simple. Public pressure and funding. The EBU has a piss the least amount of people off policy, also known as apolitical unless it affects funds policy. And so far, there hasn't been any indicators that dropping Israel would be better for its image than keeping it. I guarantee you a chart exists in the EBU's headquarters comparing viewership levels if Israel participates versus if it is banned. While Eurovision is a non-profit event, they still have to pay their people and have funds for next year's event. Eurovision gets its money in the form of participant fees from the broadcasters, the host broadcaster and city contributions, sponsorship revenues, ticket sales, televoting, and merch. Therefore, that is the EBU's primary goal. They care about having a nice, squeaky clean, pristine image so they can get as many participants as possible. Therefore, more broadcast money, more televoting money, and more ticket sales. I mean, did you seriously think that Russia got banned from Eurovision because they wanted to make a political statement? Oh my gosh, you really do, don't you? Okay, looks like I'm going to have to clear some things up. I am very tired of having Russia and Israel compared in this case. Regarding Eurovision, they are not the same, and here's why. People need to understand that Russia only got banned because several countries spoke out about it, and Finland and Estonia threatened to pull out entirely because of it. Of the countries that spoke up, you have Sweden, also known as Eurovision's backbone, the Netherlands, Lithuania, Norway, Poland, and of course, Ukraine. Many of which calling for the EBU to ban Russia as a whole. And the EBU was originally going to do nothing, because apolitical. Like they did when Russia invaded Georgia, and Ukraine again. If Finland and Estonia were to go through on their threats, it could also inspire more. And with radio broadcasters actually speaking up about the incident, it became hard to ignore. Meanwhile, so far, only Iceland, a participant with one of the smallest populations, has threatened to pull out this year because of Israel, and it didn't even go through with it. Only the Baltics protested when Georgia got invaded, but didn't go through with the boycotts. Therefore, Russia was allowed to stay and host that year. You thought I was going to say that one country was worse than the other, didn't you? No, because that would be political, which I am not. It wasn't the EBU that ultimately banned Russia, it was the individual broadcasters that showed that Eurovision 2022 would bleed more views and money if Russia were to participate than if it was banned. Even though Eurovision still lost 22 million views between 2021 and 2022 anyway, but part of that was also Ukrainians that were unaccounted for. Because Russia and Ukraine never like to submit their viewership numbers for some reason, because they hate data. So let's say that Russia's leaving cost them about maybe 19 million views, which is slightly more than the estimated people that probably would have boycotted due to their country's withdrawal or by protesting, which I estimate that would be around 17 to 18 million. But overall, this would have taken a chunk out of Eurovision's budget for the next year. There would be fewer participant fees from broadcasters as more countries would refuse to participate. Sponsorship revenues would go down because at the time, brands were pulling from anything to do with Russia. Ticket sales would be down because with that inflation and the sanctions, not many Russians are going to be able to go to Eurovision live. But Ukrainians, Finns, Estonians, Lithuanians, Poles, Icelanders, Norwegians, and Swedes will. And they will buy merch too. Televoting in Russia is much cheaper than everywhere else. Meanwhile, Estonia has the highest televoting price out of all the participants, and Finland isn't too far behind. Assuming that Russia's televoting price is about 44 cents like it was in 2017, in terms of revenue, 1 Estonian equals more than 3 Russians. Also, if Russia wasn't banned, they were going to drop off anyways. If someone in Russia could go to jail for a video like this, very likely Russia would have probably gone the same route as Belarus, or the same route as Hungary, who thought the show was too gay. But all of this would never have happened if broadcasters didn't speak out or threaten to withdraw. But that's just one country. We have yet to talk about the other controversial incident. In 2020, Belarus had an election where the president/dictator that's been around since Belarus's independence, Alexander Lukashenko, won again. And there were big protests where lots of people were arrested, beaten, exactly what you'd expect from a country whose president literally worships the USSR. The Belarusian broadcaster BTRC was going to resend Val, their 2020 choice, but stated in September of 2020 that they would reject sending Val because they supported the election protest. And so in 2021, even though they normally host their own mini contest and have the people decide, I know, shocking for Belarus, this time they had an internal selection, who picked Galasy z Miesta with the song Ya nauču tebya, or I'll Teach You. And initially the EBU was okay with it. Now this was an interesting song. It literally started with the sentence, Смотри вперед, забудь что было, translated to, look forward, forget what happened. It also has such beautiful lines such as, the free world is inevitable, outdated, unworthy, and look at the vegetables, all the meat, rejoice, even if you are angry. Dream about new bells and whistles. Basically, the song says, forget all the election rigging and the beating up of the protesters thing and the opposition that disappeared in prison. Democracy is overrated. Sit down, shut up, and be happy you have food. Needless to say, insulting and political, especially given the surrounding context of Val being banned and there being an internal selection. Sweden took away Belarus's spot in the Melodifestivalen jury. A Swedish political party and the Belarusian Foundation for Cultural Solidarity actively called for Belarus to be disqualified. When Sweden breaks its neutrality, you know you effed up. Additionally, Belarusians themselves called for a ban. And several Eurovision news websites stated that they would stop giving coverage to Belarus's song. It took 2 days for the EBU not to issue a ban, but to offer Belarus to change their song, or at least the lyrics, or risk not competing. This was not the first time this has happened, and this is what the EBU does to songs that they think are too political. Also remember the song We Aren't Gonna Putin. Armenia's Face the Shadow had to change its title in 2016, but that was it, likely because it was historical and it got a pass. Kind of like 1944. The only reason 1944 was admitted was because it was about an event that happened almost 80 years ago and seen as historical rather political. Remember that, history is fine according to the ESC, as we've seen other songs about historical events. And the only one protesting 1944 was, of course, Russia. None of the other broadcasters cared. Stefania was not political until after the war happened. It was originally a song about someone's mom, and still is a song about someone's mom. Anyway, back to Belarus. So Belarus redid the song, and the new song they produced was even worse. Pieśnia pro Zajcev, or the song about hares, Galasy z Miesta openly admitted was a song insulting the EU, with homophobic insults thrown in there for good measure. Imagine the backlash if the EBU allowed this revised song to go on with all the homophobic references. So again, the piss as few people off as possible mantra strikes again. And by then, the deadline to submit the song was up and it was too late for them to revise. Since this was the most scandalous thing to ever happen in Eurovision at the time, the EBU proposed a 3-year ban for Belarus, which I think didn't fit the crime, but this was before 2022. The EBU gave Belarus time to respond before their 3-year suspension commenced. And Belarus said, Nah. Now, why is Belarus's case relevant? Well, recent events are not the only reason why people are calling for Israel to withdraw. Israel changed up its lyrics 4 times this year because their song was originally about October 7th. The original song was, it was quite political, I'm not going to lie. There didn't even need to be a backlash. The EBU instantly told them, hey, this is too political, change the song. Don't get me wrong, this is a beautiful song. And the original draft of October Rain is a beautiful, heartfelt song that is a wonderful tribute to those lost and tortured on that day, especially at a music festival. It was a tragic event that deserves to be remembered, and this is a wonderful way to do that. It's a beautiful song, but not for Eurovision. Using these souls to try to win a song contest when the incident is still so fresh and people are still grieving and missing their loved ones that are held hostage. With Face the Shadow in 1944, those are decades that have passed. It's barely even been 6 months since October 7th. I know the lyrics have been changed to be more vague, but we all know what it's really about because of the controversy around it. And it really doesn't help that Eden's from Russia, further adding to this clusterfuck of controversy that is Israel's Eurovision entry this year. I'm pretty sure if they sent someone like Nadav Guyejd with a normal, catchy song, I think Israel would have had a lot less backlash. I'm not saying Israel should step down or shouldn't step down. I just feel a little uncomfortable with the context behind this song. And those are the only opinions I am going to give in this video. The difference between Belarus and Israel is that Israel complied with whatever the EBU wanted, revised their song, and most importantly, met the deadline, thus staying within the rules. Say what you want, but they met the rules. Belarus and Russia are not permanently banned. They can reapply for EBU membership if they really want to. Just like in 2017, Russia could have chosen to send another artist that didn't break Ukrainian law. The EBU even offered her to perform remotely, but Russia chose not to. So you saw the process that led to both Russia and Belarus's bans. Both of them involved mass outrage by the people that led to major national broadcasters condemning them and calling for their withdrawal, and in some cases, threatening to not let their country participate in Eurovision at all. Now, let's compare that to this situation with Israel. Let's see how these broadcasters reacted to Israel. Norwegian broadcaster NRK, no official position, and then later stating it will not boycott. The Sweden, Netherlands, and Greece, no official position. Denmark openly supported Israel participating. Ireland, this is a non-political event, we're going to go with whatever the EBU decides. Finland will follow the situation in the Middle East, but we're not going to do anything. Spain, we're not going to do anything. A far-left party member did call for a boycott, but nobody cared. Belgium, the broadcasters did absolutely nothing. However, a member of the Communist Party called to exclude Israel because of Russia, but they're commies, so of course no one took them seriously. Slovenia, RTV SLO asked the EBU to hold extensive discussions with its member broadcasters regarding Israeli participation, but nothing came of it. Other than Iceland, this is the closest thing that another country has come to even condemning Israel. A few former participants said they would boycott. Iceland was the only country threatening to boycott, and then ended up going through with it anyway. Honestly, Iceland should have boycotted this year anyways because their entry is So with the exception of Iceland and kind of Slovenia, but not really, the broadcasters did absolutely nothing. Why the local broadcasters decided to do absolutely nothing and why they are taking a different stance with Israel is a whole separate issue that is a completely different discussion. The broadcasters didn't even say, we condemn these actions, like they normally tend to do when they pretend to care about something. And this, my fellow nerds, is the core difference between Russia's situation and Israel's situation, and why Israel is not Russia. So what can people actually do to have their voices heard? What can people actually do to make the EBU take them seriously, not just for this situation, but for future situations that may arise as well? Not saying I support or condemn boycotting or doing anything like this, by the way. If the EBU decided to let another controversial country participate next year or something, the same would apply. The EBU tends to care most about its image and its funds. If you can convince them that kicking out a country would bring in more revenue or affect participation, then it would be dropped. As seen from Eurovision's history, the primary thing that can lead to a Eurovision ban or removal is due to a song or getting multiple broadcasters to boycott or at least condemn a country's participation. That did not happen this year. That is why Israel stays. Ultimately, the local broadcasters hold all the power. Therefore, it would be much more effective to encourage individual countries to boycott rather than to target the EBU as a whole. Multiple broadcasters came out against Russia, showing that if Russia were to participate, not only would it look bad for the ESC's image, but it would cost them more money and funds than if Russia were to go. But what can you do now to have your voice heard now that all the participants are locked in? Boycotting by not watching it doesn't really impact the revenue too much, especially if you're watching it on YouTube with an ad blocker like everyone else. Not voting, not buying tickets, and not buying merch, however, does impact it. Now that you know that, there's a couple of other things I want to discuss. For those of you planning to boycott Eurovision this year, I understand and respect your decision. However, I also want you to understand and respect those who still watch it this year instead of attacking them. You can protest in whatever way you see fit. That's what's so beautiful about living in a place where freedom of speech is allowed. But that being said, it's about basic respect. And if there's one thing I've learned over the years, it's that you don't change people's minds by insulting them. In fact, it only makes them double down. Some of us want to support the other artists this year, as this entire thing is not their fault and they shouldn't be punished for it. These artists can't back out even if they wanted to because legal contracts. Same goes for the other people that have other roles in the ESC, like costume designers, stage workers, etc. Some of us may be watching as a way to divorce ourselves from the garbage surrounding our lives. Some people protest in their own way, and just because it's in a way you don't like, doesn't mean it's wrong. Whatever the reason, going out and harassing someone for not boycotting Eurovision this year doesn't make you a good activist. You want to be a good activist? You want to know what you can actually do to help people? Do you feel like you're just screaming into the void? Do you still want to watch Eurovision but feel guilty about doing so? Or maybe you don't feel guilty and you actually want to help the world, unlike the people you've been arguing with over the internet. Then how about actually helping ensure the people that you're preaching about actually get the help they need? Well, as someone who used to work in the NGO sphere, I actually know an organization that actually does things in Gaza, as well as many other places like the Idlib region of Syria. Med Global is a charity organization that works in all of these different places, providing medical care in disaster regions. No, this video is not sponsored, nor is this an official promotion. This is a group whose work I have actually witnessed in person, and they're an organization that I know for sure actually does something in Gaza. Your money will actually go to who it needs to go to when you donate to them, and you can even choose which program you want your money to go to. Regardless of who you side with, they have something for everyone. So, what have we learned today? Russia and Belarus's bans are not comparable to Israel, as they did not have the same reactions from the broadcasters. Therefore, EBU interpreted that as causing more drama if they were to kick Israel than keeping it. The way to get the EBU to actually do something is to have multiple national broadcasters actively get involved, being it condemnation, threatening to boycott, removing their country's role from their national finals, getting the government involved, etc. Showing the EBU that their viewing experience and their participants will be worse off is the ultimate goal. Overall, this is kind of a no-win situation for the EBU, and for all of us. It's literally impossible to be apolitical in situations like this. I'm even teetering on the edge just making this video here, and I know despite my disclaimers, I'm going to have comments accusing me of being anti-Israel and anti-Palestine all at once. Yes, I see you keyboard warriors. I know what you're going to type. Do it, man. Boost my video in the algorithm. I dare you. You're evil if you take a side. You're still evil if you don't. You can't win in this situation. I kind of feel a little bit bad for the EBU because it seems like they genuinely want to stay apolitical, but the world is not allowing them to.